Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Staff Devotions. Today is Tuesday, April 28th. It's late Thursday night, and Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane with 11 of his disciples. You'll remember that during the Passover meal, Judas has already left to inform the religious leaders of where Jesus is so that they can gather a band of soldiers and come and arrest him. Jesus is in the garden, and we find himself at this point at his very lowest point, emotionally speaking. And to fully understand exactly what's going on here, we've got to resist the temptation to minimize Jesus's humanity here. After all, Jesus is fully human, and in the garden, we see him coming to grips with the torture and death that he is about to suffer on the cross. Like Adam, Jesus is tempted in a garden to abandon the will of God for his life. Let's read this account of the scene from Mark chapter 14, starting in verse 32. And they went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." And he took with him Peter and James and John. Now, pause right there for a moment. Why did Jesus take these three? Why not a different three? Why didn't he take all 11 of the disciples? Well, Peter, James, and John have always sort of been Jesus's inner circle of disciples, the most reliable of the 12, the most trustworthy. Surely Jesus can count on his top three, right? We'll check it out in verse 33. Jesus began to be greatly distressed and troubled, and he said to them, "My soul is very sorrowful, even unto death. Remain here and watch." Now, by watch, he means keep guard. And going a little farther, he fell on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. Now, it's important that we see Jesus' emotional distress here. The Son of the living God, when he looks at the cross, is ready to walk away from it all. When he imagines his death, and most importantly, his separation from God the Father, it throws Jesus into an emotional panic. Mark tells us that he actually falls down on the ground while he prays, and Luke tells us that his sweat became like great drops of blood. And that's actually a medical condition caused by incredible amounts of stress. It will cause your capillaries in your skin to actually burst and mingle with the sweat. And so Jesus is right now at the lowest emotional point of his entire ministry. In verse 36, Jesus prays and he says this, "Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will." And Jesus, in his prayer, is using the familiar language of a son. Now, contrary to popular belief, the word Abba is not the same as the English word daddy. Abba is simply the Aramaic word for father. It was used by both young children and adult sons to refer to their parents. Jesus begs his Father to deliver him from the cross. And yet, at the same time, more than anything, Jesus wants to do his Father's will. So once again, even in his request, he humbly submits to God the Father's plan. Meanwhile, the disciples who are supposed to be keeping guard over their master as he prays have fallen fast asleep, and Jesus approaches them. Look at verse 37. He came and found Peter, James, and John sleeping, and he said to Peter, "Simon, are you asleep? Could you not watch 1 hour? Watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." So Jesus scolds Peter for sleeping at a time when he should have been praying. You'll notice that Jesus addresses Peter with the name Simon, which is the name that Peter used to go by before he met the Messiah. Jesus here might be indicating that Peter has reverted back to his old way of living before Christ. Jesus then warns Peter that his temptation is coming and that prayer is the only thing that will prepare him for what he is about to face. Peter is too self-confident for prayer, however, and he chooses instead to grab a little shut-eye. Jesus continues in prayer, and verse 39 says, "Again he went and prayed, saying the same words. And again he came and found the disciples sleeping, for their eyes were heavy, and they didn't know what to answer him." So Jesus comes back, and they've fallen asleep again, and he scolds them again, and they have nothing to say. They're so ashamed. Verse 41, "And he came the third time and said to them, 'Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? It is enough,'" that is, enough sleep. "You've had enough sleep. The hour has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hand of sinners. Rise and let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." So 3 times Jesus leaves the disciples and begs his Father to deliver him from the cross. 3 times God tells his Son no. And 3 times Jesus found the disciples sleeping. Now, what a scene this is. I mean, how the Son of God must have felt. Anyone else would have run away, but not Jesus. Even though he seemed to be all alone, he wasn't about to let anything keep him from accomplishing the mission that God had sent him on, the mission to take away the sins of his people. Jesus' sincere prayer time gave him the strength that he needed to face the trials that lay ahead. Peter, on the other hand, was well rested and ready to deny the Lord. So this passage teaches us a number of things about Christ and a number of things about the disciples, but I want us to focus on the importance of prayer in all of this. Every day is filled with temptations, and we have no idea what we're going to face. The only thing that we can do in order to prepare ourselves for the temptations that we will face is by spending adequate time in prayer, asking God to give us the strength that we need to resist the devil's temptation and perform God's will for our lives. I don't know about you, but I certainly feel temptations the strongest and the most difficult to resist after I have spent little time in prayer. So let's recommit ourselves to praying that God would give us the strength that we need to accomplish his will and resist the temptations that surround us, and let's serve others today. God bless you and have a great day.